Good morning, filmmakers, and welcome to the Sound 101 seminar. My name is Mike Sheriff, and I'm the Youth Film Festival's manager for the Four City Film Festival, and I'm so thrilled to be here with you this morning. Today's seminar is chock full of tips and techniques for capturing great sound quality in your projects, and this is really important stuff. Great sound quality can deepen the audience's immersive experience, help tell a complex story, and even evoke an emotional response. Poor sound quality, on the other hand, can ruin an otherwise amazing project. As you'll soon discover, capturing great sound quality, whether it's for a short film, a video essay, or a TikTok video, doesn't have to be a hassle or require expensive gear. We have two special guests joining us today. Randy Rektor is a graduate of the Ontario Institute of Audio Recording Technology, a full-time video content producer and a YouTuber. With over 15 years of recording studio and music performance experience, Randy brings his audio know-how to his audience through gear reviews, recording tutorials, and audio best practices. Calvin Cao is a high school student and documentary filmmaker based in London, Ontario. His short film, Apathy Apocalypse, won the Best Documentary Award and Best Use of Sound Award at the 2022 Forest City Youth Film Festival, and was a runner-up in the documentary category at the 2022 Ontario Youth Film Festival. Randy and Calvin have pre-recorded a super instructive seminar for us, and they'll be joining us afterward for a live Q&A. As you watch the video, think about what questions you might want to ask them, and then post these questions in the live stream chat. Don't worry if you miss a tip or a technique along the way. The live stream video will soon be posted on our educators portal at oyff.ca, where you can watch it again and again. So, without further ado, let's roll the video.
Hello everyone, my name is Randy and I am an audio engineer, YouTube creator, video producer, a bit of a mix, and this is my wonderful co-host,
Calvin. I'm an aspiring filmmaker.
Amazing. Let's jump into our topics today. So we're gonna basically cover all of the audio steps that you can take to get good, clean, consistent audio in your video project. So this is gonna go right from the most basic thing that you can do, recording directly to your camera, and we'll talk through the steps on how you can improve that, and then different equipment and tools that you can use to increase the production value to ultimately tell a better story. So at the fundamentals, we want to tell the story through audio, and we want to use the tools only to increase how we're telling that story, or to use them as ways that we can have some creative liberties and, basically making sure that everything that we do is intentional and that it's serving the story. So
Randy, I'm curious, why should we care so much about capturing good audio? When people think about film, usually the first thing they think about is what's on screen.
Yeah.
Is audio just as or even as more important than what's going on screen?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of people say that audio is almost more important in some ways, and I know that, I'm a sucker for good video, but with audio, it's something that people find they can't sit around if the production quality of the audio is bad, whereas they can handle, shaky video or low resolution footage. But if the audio is bad, they can't hear the subject matter, they can't hear the story, there's no real value there. So
I mean, think of like when you're watching a YouTube video, if the graphics or the video isn't super high quality, it can be minimalist, it can be comedic. But if the audio is bad quality, it just shows that you're a little lazy, right?
Yeah, there is a certain expectation that the audio is going to reach the basic threshold, and then anything above that is just, it's getting out of the way of the story. And that's kind of ultimately what you want to do is find ways that the equipment isn't in the shot and that you can just really serve the story and give the best audio possible. So I've prepared a few examples today that we can go through that kind of go through these different pieces of gear. So right up to, expensive shotgun microphones, and then as inexpensive as recording on a cell phone, and how we can use a simple cell phone to record really high quality audio. Okay, so let's jump into the first example here, which is a very simple scene that I set up in my basement. And the first example is just speaking directly to the camera, so we can kind of have a listen to how that audio translates over through the camera audio. Hi, this is what it sounds like when I record directly to the microphone in the camera. It's about 7 feet away from me right now, and this is how roomy it sounds. So I think it's pretty clear even to people that don't have a background in audio that that's not great. You can hear like the hissing coming from the camera's cheap interface. Like it just doesn't sound good. The footsteps sound loud in relation to the voice. Everything just kind of sounds flat and hissy and gross and really reverby because the microphone is like 7 feet away. So it's just that, yeah, we don't want to do that. So the next step that I would take would be adding in something like this. This is a Rode VideoMic Pro Plus, and it's got a little fuzzy thing on it that I can take off here so you can see what it looks like. This is basically just a small shotgun microphone. And what this is gonna do is increase the directionality of the audio. So it's gonna pick up more things from the front side and less things from around it. So what we'll do with accomplishing that is have less reverb in our dialogue. That's the goal anyways, but let's take a listen to this and see if it sounds any better, any less reverby. So this is example number 2. Hi, this is me recording to the camera using the Rode VideoMic Pro Plus mounted on top of the camera. Again, it's about 7 feet away, and as you can tell, this room is still pretty echoey.
Wow, that already sounds a lot better. I can feel there's a lot less echo because of the directionality.
Yeah, it feels like a step up, right? Like the voice is a bit warmer. Like if I play the first one again here, and just listen to like how warm it sounds, or how not warm I should say.
This is what it sounds like when I record.
Versus this.
Recording to the camera using the...
It's a bit more like rich. You can kind of hear a bit more of like the chesty tone. Just starts to sound a little bit more like, you know, like we're focusing in on our subject. Cool. So in my opinion, that's still way too reverby for a video production. If you were listening to this in like a theater or something like that, like...
I'd be thinking like, what high school student made this?
Yeah, what is going on with this? Why is it sounding like this? So what you see, and this is actually something I see all the time on TikTok and stuff like that, is people taking their cell phone and using it as a microphone. And then the thing about that is that you have to sync up that audio in post. So there is now an element of, you know, you're adding one extra step, you're adding something that is required in post, but it's a really small thing to do for a massive leap in quality. Now, of course, if we're doing narrative, we don't want to see a cell phone like this. Like if Brad Pitt's, you know, interviewing someone, they can't have the phone out. They've got to, you know, have it hidden in the set. So let's just take a listen to the difference it makes when the cell phone is recorded really close. Again, this is just, you know, a normal cell phone app. We're just using a standard voice recorder thing on the cell phone here. Hi. This is me recording right into my iPhone that's sitting right here on the desk. The microphone's a lot closer to me now, so it should sound a little bit less reverby.
To me, that's kind of surprising because like when we think of iPhone mics, usually quality isn't the thing that comes to mind. So I guess that really shows that even if you don't have a lot of expensive equipment, even money for such a professional like directional mic, you can still achieve some pretty good sound.
Yeah, it's the classic people assuming that resolution in video equals a better video. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with a phone. Like the resolution of this is probably not as good as you know, what's being picked up on the camera. If you look at what gets spit out of a phone's recording, there's a lot of frequency content missing. They roll off a whole bunch of high end and stuff. But what you're hearing is the microphone being closer to the subject. And so we as an audience hear that and we say like, oh, that sounds better. Even though the frequency content isn't there, it's not nearly as high quality as a, you know, recording direct into your camera, you're hearing that it's closer to the subject, and that tells us, okay, this is personal. It's starting to shape the sound. So I don't know if you notice the difference in the footsteps. Take a listen to this. So we're always working with what we call signal to noise ratio. As audio people, this is like, it's our whole bread and butter, it's our life. And that means that we want our signal to be as loud as possible, with the noise being as low as possible. Noise being planes going by or cars outside, whatever it may be. So the closer we get that microphone to our subject, the more signal we have versus the noise. Does that kind of make sense?
So that explains why in the first example everything was so, well, it sounded just so bad because there was so much echo, which was the noise.
Yep.
And because the mic was so far away, there wasn't so much signal.
Exactly. Yeah. So with the phone, listen to the footsteps as I walk in.
Hi, this is me.
Versus the level of my dialogue. And then let's take a listen to the camera audio.
Hi, this is what it sounds like.
The footsteps in that example are almost louder than the voice. And then in the cell phone example, now the voice is starting to sound a little bit more rich. It's like the microphone's right here. It's nice and close. You kind of get that warmth. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So, of course, this is not going to work for narrative because there's a cell phone in the shot and the director's going to hate it. So what we can do to remedy that is what we call a plant microphone. And you'll see there's actually a plant in this shot. And we don't call it a plant because we've added a plant to the shot. We call it a plant because it's planted within our shot. So there's now a microphone in the shot. And I actually I think I made that joke in this recording, but.
Hi, this is me recording directly into my iPhone, although this time the iPhone's placed right behind this plant. Now this is what we refer to as a plant microphone, not because it's behind the plant, but because it's planted within our scene.
So this is one simple way that we can hide a microphone on the shot, whether it's on our subject or whether it's, physically sitting on the shot. And you could do that with wireless microphones, with lav mics like this. You'll see these tucked into all kinds of things. They put them in the visor in cars. You can put them really wherever. It's just sometimes it's a better idea to have this planted in the shot than on your actor, especially if they're wearing like a bikini or something. There's less places to hide one of these.
Interesting. So that's actually a thing they do in like movies. They hide like microphones behind plants.
Yeah. Wherever you can get the microphone that's going to give you the best results. So sometimes you're working with the wardrobe department. Maybe someone has, a rustling shirt or something like that. And you as the audio expert have to say like, hey, that's not going to work for this shot because I'm getting way too much. Can we figure something out? Can we work together to find something? But you might also be working with the props department and saying, can we add a roast beef to this table so that I can stick a mic inside of it and hide it? Because none of the
That's so
actors,
funny.
yeah. So they'll be on the table sometimes in shots, or if an actor's walking somewhere and they can't get a boom in the shot, they'll plant a mic. You really just have to be creative and get the microphone as close to that actor as possible. So let's move on to the next example. So when we're talking about stepping up our quality, we've now made it to the iPhone, which is like, let's call this free because it's something that you probably have. Everyone's got their phone with them, right? So yeah, exactly. Exactly. So these are things that we can do without having to buy additional gear. If we want to step up our quality a little bit, we can jump up to something like this. This is the Zoom H1 handheld recorder. These go for like $100. They're pretty inexpensive, relatively speaking. And the good thing about this is that the audio quality coming out of this is a massive step up from the phone. We still run into the same issues that we have to hide it somewhere. You can either boom this in above your subject. You can, put it as a plant mic in a shot. You can even plug in a lavalier microphone into one of these and put this in your pocket and run the lav up your shirt or something like that. So there's tons of options. It's basically just a portable recorder. But what we'll find is that the quality is slightly better than the phone. This may be a bit difficult to hear any difference, but let's take a listen to this anyways.
Hi, this is me recording into my Zoom H1 handheld recorder, which again is sitting right here behind this plant.
So what's interesting about this is when you compare that against the phone, it's almost like the difference between recording raw footage and not raw footage, that when you're in post, you have a lot more flexibility to work with the raw footage. Mm-hmm. So for things like color grading, you can pull different colors you just have a bit more control and you can manipulate the file a bit more. That's sort of the same thing with the Zoom, is it's giving you a bit higher resolution file so you have a bit more room to play and you can kind of tweak it to fit the scene.
Well, I think that's what I understand from that, and what I think is really inspiring is that you don't need some expensive equipment to capture some decent quality sound. Like even an iPhone, you can get some decent sound out of that.
Yeah.
So I think that's really inspiring to many young filmmakers who don't have the funds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually you've got the right shirt on for this, but a lot of people, what they'll do is flip their phone upside down, throw it in the breast pocket there, and it's it's really in an optimal spot. Like that's almost one of the best places you could have a microphone. So it's a simple thing that you can do, and you can sync it up later. One of the challenges, I guess, with that is that there may be some rustling or something like that you might not be aware of while you're filming, especially if you're a one-person band and you're trying to do the camera work and you're trying to do the audio. So the best thing you can do is right after your take, have a listen, put on some headphones, make sure that the file turned out great. But just something to be mindful of is you're gonna have to start sort of monitoring all these different pieces of equipment to make sure that they're performing properly. So let's jump up to the next step here. So the next thing is wireless recording. And so you can get these wireless microphones. There's some on Amazon. I have a box somewhere, actually, I'm not sure where it is, but you can get them for like $80. They're quite inexpensive, relatively speaking again. And what these are transmitter and receiver. And they basically will take your audio in and send it to your camera. And this is a great system for any sort of narrative toward the camera. One of the challenges with these is these run on the Wi-Fi band, which basically means if you turn around from the camera, sometimes you get dropouts because these actually need line of sight to be able to work properly. But they're really cool because you have some more flexibility, you can move around, you can, play with props, whatever you want to do, and you're not tethered to a spot where there's a planted mic or something like that.
So what are the advantages of using one of these over, say, one of these mics here?
So the main advantage would be that these actually send a signal back to your camera, which is great because if the audio goes back to your camera, your audio will be embedded in your video file.
So no having to sync it up later.
No syncing. You can just start editing in your editor and all the audio will be intact, perfectly in sync with the video, which is awesome.
But there is that risk of the connection dropping. Yeah.
Yes. And so some of this one actually has a built-in recorder inside of it. So similar to how this works, this will actually allow you to record a copy to a micro SD card. I think there's one in here. Yes, it's not an SD card, it's just a built-in memory, but you can actually record directly to the inside of this. That way, if you look at your camera, the feed that you got from it, and the audio cut out at some point, you can always recover it just from pulling the footage off here, or the audio off here.
That's great.
Yeah, so let's take a listen to how these wireless sound in the same set.
Hi, this is me sending a wireless signal from this microphone right here to the receiver on top of the camera.
Do you notice anything about the quality? What are your thoughts?
I think it was even because you had it just under your mouth where you're talking, it did feel a little closer and more rich.
Yeah, exactly. So a couple pros, a couple cons that I want to explain here. So you're totally right on with that. That's like what I love the most about this is we're getting the most signal to noise ratio out of any of these setups that we've had so far. The microphone is like, it's 6 inches. It's also on my chest, which is giving some of that chesty warmth because when you're speaking, a lot of the sound is actually coming from your chest, your throat, it's all working together. So having a microphone right here means you get tons of warmth, you get that proximity, it sounds close and it sounds intimate. And so for storytelling purposes, that's something that we can really harness is out of these setups so far, let's say it's a love scene and there's two characters, talking about how they love each other so much. We can use a microphone like this to get that sort of close, almost like whispery, intimate sounding dialogue. Whereas if we did it with a microphone like this,
Hi, this is what...
you wouldn't feel like you're there with them. You wouldn't feel like you're part of that scene versus, again, with a wireless microphone.
Hi, this is me sending a wireless...
You can hear all those, you can hear my mouth opening, you can hear all of the things that I'm doing. Let's say I'm an actor in this situation. You can hear all the little ways that I'm emoting and that I'm acting, and it's pulling out all those little nuances because the microphone is so close.
So on the other hand, what if you wanted to make someone feel really distant and maybe colder in a scene?
Yeah. So a few ways that we can do that. We could record them with any of these methods, and we can alter that in post. So making someone sound far away is really easy to do with post-processing. Making someone sound closer is almost impossible to do. So we can really do that with any setup. If it was truly we just need this person to sound really distant and far away, there'd be nothing wrong with having a microphone on top of your camera and having it just record directly into your camera. I would definitely do that. If I thought the director might want more control and they might say, I'm not sure that I like how distant they sound, I would record with a backup just to make sure, just so you have all your bases covered.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So again, we run into the same problem with this that we did with the cell phone example, and that's that you can see it sitting here on my shirt.
This is me sending a wireless signal from...
Which isn't gonna work for some producers. They're gonna say, hey, I don't wanna see that microphone. So we have other options. We could plant this microphone, we could put it on a table, or we can actually run a lav, and this is super common for people to do. So what they'll do is plug the lav mic into here. Now this bypasses the microphone that's here, and it chooses to use the one on the cord instead. And then what I would do with this is run this up the shirt and tape this right to the inside of the collar. And you can be kind of sneaky about how you do that. You just use some like bandage tape or like medical tape, and that'll hold it on really well. With that, you may get some rustling and stuff like that. So this is where we start to get to the point where it's like, you're starting to need a operator to monitor your sound at all times. And if you'll notice on this next clip here, let's go ahead and play this one with the lav.
Hi, this is me with a wireless mic taped right to my skin beneath my collar, and I'm transmitting a wireless signal via the same wireless microphone directly to my camera.
So a couple things here. So we're getting that same proximity. It's great. We don't see the microphone, so that's also great. You do get a bit of rustling on the shirt. I'll see if I can play this again.
Hi, this is me with a wireless mic taped right to my skin beneath my collar, and I'm transmitting a wireless signal via the same wireless microphone directly to my camera.
And the second thing is that it's actually clipping a little bit, and this is a great example of where I learned my lesson that I wasn't paying close enough attention to the audio, and when I plugged this in, I realized that this microphone actually records slightly louder than this microphone. And so this is such a great example of why at this stage you start needing a second hand, you start needing an operator to help you with this stuff, just because there was no way for me to monitor that and do this scene and do the camera stuff at the same time. So it's a great example of why you start to need, more hands on deck when you're filming. But yeah, getting a bit of distortion out of that, and that's something that you just need to watch for. But I will say, it seemed like we're getting less and less room, we're getting less and less echo going on. And
Absolutely.
One last thing about this is if we take a listen to the end of the clip.
Directly to my camera. Directly to my camera.
Do you hear that buzzing there?
Yeah.
Let me play it one more time so you can hear.
Directly to my camera.
So where's that buzzing coming from?
That's the thing with these wireless units, is sometimes they make noises. Sometimes they pick up cell towers, they pick up whatever. Again, this is going back to that point of having someone else there. There should always be someone with a pair of headphones monitoring where these are going. So whether that's going directly into the camera and they plug into the camera to take a listen, there would be no possibility of me knowing that happened while I was filming. So that's one of the challenges with self-filming, or if you're producing on a budget and there are not many people involved in your shoot. Wireless units, they add a whole set of complications. Also, if you want to use multiples of these units, you have to make sure that they're all on different frequency bands so that they don't crosstalk with one another, and it's a whole job making sure that wireless are working properly on set. Mm-hmm. So the very last option that we have here is using what we call a broadcast shotgun microphone. And so these are much like the Rode VideoMic Pro Plus, that they're really directional. So these are gonna help us sort of focus in on our subject. These would be great in like a really crowded area where you really want just the one speaker and you kind of want to ignore all the stuff going on outside.
Yeah, we're thinking like that bar scene, noisy bar scene.
Yep, exactly. So you can use these to record your subject and get tons of their voice, their chest, get that really nice, rich, warm sound without having the distractions of the surrounding things around them. So pros are that you get that nice focused sound. The cons are that if your subject moves at all, they very quickly will go outside of that radius that the microphone picks up. So you can actually use these in combination with wireless microphones. And this is the most common setup that you'd see in Hollywood. They would have a microphone on each person. as well as a boom over the shot. And the operator would actually have all of the lines internalized and almost memorized, like quite literally, and they will follow the actors through the scene, turning the microphone to each person that you see. So above every scene you've probably ever watched in Hollywood, there is some guy doing this back and forth constantly. It's a crazy job. They have ridiculously strong arms. It's fun. So let's take a listen to how the shotgun sounds in this set. Hi, this is me recording into my shotgun microphone that's boomed in above the frame. The microphone is just at a frame here. It's about 12 inches away. And if everything has gone right, this should be the best sounding of them all. So some things to point out too is like, you can still hear a bit of reverb back there. Like if you listen kind of between my words, let's take a listen here.
Done right, this should be the best sounding of them all.
You can still tell that it's recorded in a big space. And the only way around that is treating your space before you even start shooting. And so something that a lot of sound recordists will do is bring with them moving blankets, stuff like that, things that they can put up around the actors. But this is where we go back to like the beginning stages of the video production to know what do we need to do to get the best sounding audio that we possibly can. Are we actually going to be recording in these really echoey spaces, or is there anything that we can do to treat it? Is the film crew going to be okay if I put up blankets everywhere? There's a whole bunch of questions that kind of go back to the pre-production stage of things. And a good sound recordist will be very aware of where they're going to be recording, and they'll bring the appropriate equipment to accomplish the right task. So this is sort of the beginner's kit, and this is what you could bring out to really emphasize your story. You got lots of different tools, lots of different options, and there's no right or wrong with any of these. They all work.
Mm-hmm. So briefly, before we wrap up, I'm wondering, now that you've talked a bit about pre-production, let's say you capture some audio, maybe it's pretty good audio, but just with a little bit of reverb, or maybe there's, something went wrong in the scene, a plane flew by, and the audio is like being rushed to the post-production ER. Well, how do we make the best out of what we have?
Yeah, so there are a few options that we can deal with. So my first question when I'd be listening to a piece of audio like that is, does it still serve the scene? If there's a plane going by, is it distracting enough that the director doesn't like it? Is it, just sort of trying to triage that emergency. Like, is it really ruining the take, or does it sound like a plane went by and the audience will just know like, oh, a plane went by? So that's the first question. If we think, okay, no, this needs to be salvaged, there are tools that we can use to de-noise certain situations. We can de-reverb, de-noise, we can take out hiss and stuff like that. Every step that we do that's de-noising or de-reverbing or whatever it may be is degrading our audio. So it's important to know that you're basically pulling a slider between like the amount of noise and the amount of bad destroyed audio. So you're pulling that slider in between there to try to find the sweet spot. And at some point, you're going to go so far that it just starts to sound bad. And that's when you might need to either do ADR, which is automatic dialogue replacement, which means you have the actor come into the studio and they say their line over again while they're watching the screen. So they basically lip sync to what they did before. They might do 20, 30 takes of that. You find the best one and drop it into your video editor. Or worst case scenario, you have a reshoot. And those can be insanely expensive. You're having actors come out again, film crews, you might be renting locations, just a ton of expenses that go along with that. So trying to avoid that, ADR is actually pretty common. Sometimes mics will rustle, like you heard in that one example. There might have been a gust of wind that hit the microphone and they might have not had adequate protection on. Sometimes if you just run your hand by a mic, or like an actor moves too much, you might get a gust of wind. All things like that, if they can't be repaired, you might have to come in and do a couple lines.
Well, thank you so much, Randy. I felt like I've learned so much about every single stage of the audio process.
Amazing, yeah. Thanks for hearing me out and letting me rant about audio. I love to talk about this stuff. So you did a project called Apathy Apocalypse.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
So it is a short documentary about climate change denial, and it actually ended up winning the Best Sound Design Award at the Forest City Youth Film Festival. Thank you.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
So I guess can we look at it a little
Yeah,
and
let's
talk
take a-
about how I use sound?
Absolutely. Let's jump in here and just stop me if you want to stop at any point.
Sure.
On October 22, 1962,
Okay, I need to stop you. What'd you use for your microphone?
I just used a standard like USB mic that I borrowed from my school.
Amazing. Amazing. That's awesome. And what space were you recording in?
The least echoey place in my school, which was still pretty echoey. I think you can probably tell.
No, it sounds great. It
No?
sounds great.
All right.
One trick that a lot of voice talent will use is they'll go into like a walk-in closet where there's all of their clothes, hung on hangers, and that's actually a really great space because there's so much fabric around. There's usually carpet on the floors. It can be a really dead space, which makes a great voiceover booth.
I got to keep that in mind.
Yeah, let's play.
President John F. Kennedy announced the Soviet Union was arming Cuba with nuclear missiles. People.
So if you notice there, now obviously I don't want to talk like I'm some expert here.
No,
but
you're great.
My thought process behind choosing this track for this first scene was just to build tension because there's almost a bit of a twist at the end of this first segment before the title card rolls that this isn't a documentary about the Cuban Missile Crisis. So and so I used it because I felt like it was building to something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just one consideration.
That's awesome. And where do you get your sound effects from?
So all my music and sound, so there's some great websites where you have royalty-free music or even free music that you can use with attribution.
Okay.
I got this track from incomptech.com. It's a great piece by Kevin MacLeod.
Okay, great. And then with attribution just means you have to cite their name.
Yeah,
the
like
project?
in the video description or in the credits.
Okay, awesome. Cool. This is great.
Protests erupted worldwide. Stores raided for supplies. Fallout shelters built. Everyone was convinced nuclear war would break out at any moment, killing hundreds of millions of people and ending society as they knew it.
Some transitions and things you've chose to add sound effects to them, and others you've left without. Is there a reason to which ones you've chose? What's your mindset there?
So I think that, again, I'm no expert, but if you look at a lot of movie trailers, what you'll see is when you want to create a bunch of tension, or almost like a sudden, like as I just did in this scene here, where all of the sound cuts out, all the video cuts out, and it sort of gives the viewer a chance to recollect their thoughts and think about what they've just watched. So that was my reasoning behind it there.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yet strangely, nobody's panicking. According to a 2020 UN report, the world is still burning more than 2 times too much fossil fuel to avoid a climate tipping point. So, why have scientists failed to convince citizens and governments to take action? Are we all doomed to perish in our apathy?
So good. That's awesome. That's great. I like the use of the tea kettle as the smoke and.
Yeah, and the idea was that it would be, it's supposed to be really loud. I turned up the gain, by the way, a lot. It's supposed to be uncomfortable because we're talking about such an uncomfortable topic. And then it builds up again to that cutout and that dark, so that the viewer can, again, gather the thoughts before the main part of the documentary starts.
That's amazing. It's great to see that you're putting so much thought into each piece of this, because that's, after all, the creative process, it's not just the video, it's the audio as well. And you can really take advantage of those opportunities to do something intentional and to do something creative, and not just put up a sound of a kettle and just leave it. You went through and boosted the gain to make it fit the scene, to make the the viewer uncomfortable. And that's what it's all about. That's great to see.
Well, I'm honored to hear that come from you.
No,
Thank you very much.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Hey, and we're back for the live and interactive part of this seminar. Pleased to be joined by Randy and Calvin. Randy and Calvin, welcome to the live stream seminar.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure to be here.
Oh, that's great. Oh, it's great to see you guys again. It seems like only a week ago that we were recording this in Randy's studio, and I guess it was just a week ago. It's amazing how fast the time flies.
I know, no kidding.
So this is great. I really appreciate, I mean, the seminar itself is just fantastic, and like I say, chock full of great tips and techniques for the young filmmakers out there. And so for this Q&A portion, I'd just like to delve into some questions and get your feedback, and maybe cover some stuff that we weren't able to cover in the pre-recorded seminar. So Randy, the first question I'll pose to you, what are the most common problems that you see in terms of sound quality based on your experience? Is there anything in particular that our viewers should be watching out for in their own projects?
Yeah, I'd say there are a few things that really jump out at me as sort of like, you really have to avoid these things when you're capturing your audio. One is reverb. That's just something that's pretty unacceptable for people to hear, especially if you're watching it in like a big screen or something like that. It really just loses that production value. Simple ways to remedy those issues: you can get yourself some like moving blankets like this. You can get a pack of them for like $40 or something like that on Amazon. Put those up around you. They're really going to help block out some of those reflections. Second thing is bad levels. What happens when you record things too quietly is that you need to boost those later on in the process. So in post, you have to boost them. And what happens is that as you boost those in post, if they weren't captured loud enough to begin with, they can get kind of, you get a lot of hiss coming up and a lot of distortion and stuff like that. So bad levels would be the second thing. And I think the third biggest issue that I see in people who are getting started is wind noise. It's difficult to avoid if you don't have the tools to do it. But I have a whole assortment of things here in front of me. So we've got like the sort of the cheapest wind noise protection. This is like a little foam thing that just goes on top of the microphone. Slide the microphone into there. This is its big brother, which is kind of a step up. It gives you a bit more wind protection. And then you can get way up into things like this that you put your microphone in that come with, call this a dead wombat. And this is basically like a big snowsuit for your microphone.
What was that
these
called?
These are sort of it's called a dead wombat.
It's dead wombat. Is it an Australian invention? Is it like?
It is. It's Rode. Yeah, it's Rode is an Australian microphone company.
Oh, well, okay, yeah. There you go.
This is the dead wombat. This is the dead kitten. They're really terribly named. I think they should probably reconsider.
The dead kitten. No, horrible.
Yeah. They couldn't just go with like foam cover. They had to. Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be the top three issues that you see are reverb, bad levels, and wind noise. So
yeah, absolutely.
So keep an eye out for those. Okay, that's a really useful takeaway. Well, that's great. Calvin, I had a question for you. What editing software did you use on Apathy Apocalypse? And just before you answer that, I want to ask people, if you haven't seen Calvin's Apathy Apocalypse, it's just an amazing short documentary. If you check out the Forest City Youth Film Festival screening and awards show on this channel, look for, I think the documentary category is the second category that we screened, and Calvin's is the very first documentary shown. It's about 5 minutes long, well worth your time to see how this was put together. So
thank you. I really appreciate that.
Oh yeah, no, it's wonderful, like really super impressive documentary. And I was curious, what video editing software did you use when you're putting it together?
So when I was drawing the actual like pictures and animating it frame by frame, I used a software called Krita, which so the process of making this film was a very big learning process for me. I never really done any audio editing, animation before. Anyone out there, don't use Krita for animation. Please don't. It's a great visual art software. It's a terrible animation software. I'm telling you, like there were times when I was working on that film on Krita, and the software sucked so much, it made my computer
I was seriously afraid it was going to explode sometime. So but don't do that. As for the video and audio, that would be Adobe Premiere Pro. I went with it because it's sort of the industry standard for these sorts of like short form content. So yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that sounds like an interesting choice. Also, just to follow up on that, do you know how many sound effects did you use in that documentary? Like individual sound effects, not just the bass like music, but like all the little, there's just all sorts of stuff, crowd noises, kettles, whistling, all that stuff. How many individual sound effects did you use?
I do remember having a folder of all the sound effects. Another tip from what I've learned is to put a lot of scrutiny into naming and organizing your sound files, because I did not. So then I'd have wind underscore MP3, wind underscore 1 MP3, wind underscore bracket 3 point final MP. Yeah. Make sure you have one folder for your sounds and and name them all so you know what they actually are, because I didn't do that. But yeah, the folder ended up being like 30, 50 files long. So yeah, lots of sound effects went into that. Although I think a lot of them didn't make the final cut. I mean, you have to think about quality versus quantity.
That's a really good point. Yeah. So yeah, be careful with your file management, naming conventions, and all that good stuff. Those are really good insights. Yeah. So back to Randy. I'm curious, how important is it to keep the volume consistent across a scene or an entire project? Is that something that filmmakers should be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think that, there are rules that you could follow in terms of normalization and making sure that your whole project has a consistent level. But there's also a lot of art that goes into the mixing process. And so I think the bottom line is, as long as what you're doing is intentional and to tell the story, you can certainly take some artistic liberties with those levels. So they don't have to all be the same level as long as it's serving the story properly. I think that's probably the best way to answer that. Generally speaking, though, you want to make sure you're hitting a certain level that's going to, so there isn't jarring changes between scenes. You want to make sure that each scene sort of flows naturally into the next one. But as far as, does every scene have to be the same level? No, definitely not. We can use levels to add some tension and release and to tell the story differently. An action scene is going to be much louder than sort of an intimate, one character speaking to another character and telling them a secret. That's going to be much quieter. So there is some variance, but you do want to make sure that it feels fluid and feels consistent throughout.
Okay, that's really good advice. And I'm curious, is there a way to measure the audio, the level of an audio clip? I mean, besides our ears, is there a way to get down into the technical specifications? And
yeah. So honestly, the best thing that you can do is use your ears. When I was in audio school, they hammered this idea home every single day. Like I would say, to a teacher, what's your favorite microphone to use in this situation? And they would literally just say, use your ears. And I got so frustrated at the time. I'm like, can you not just give me an actual answer? I'm so curious to know. But it was such great advice because it made me so much more aware of like the right answer is often the one that feels the best in your project. And it makes you really experiment and stuff like that. That said, we do have tools like we have like meters that you can put on your mix. So you can look at the meters on each file to see how high the levels are jumping. But then we also have things that you'd put on your master bus. So something that measures LUFS or, oh my goodness, it's escaping me right now. What does that actually mean? It's escaped me. But basically, sites like YouTube, for instance, are at -14 LUFS. Spotify, I believe, is -16 LUFS. So when you're mixing for these different platforms, it's important to mix those levels so that they're going to hit that platform's standards. The nice thing about it, though, is that these platforms have made it really user-friendly. So if you don't hit their standards, if you come in way too loud or you come in way too quiet, they're just going to boost or attenuate
you're recording to make it fit their standard.
Okay.
Pro sound people don't want that site to do anything to their audio. So as close as you can get it to their specification means there's less that site is going to do to your audio, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you are going to find, like, if there's a filmmaker out there who's, say, posting to TikTok or Instagram or YouTube, they're going to have probably different technical specifications that each platform is using, and those would be found on the site. Is that correct?
Yep, you can either find them on the site, and like if you go diving through their frequently asked questions and stuff like that, they don't tend to make them all that obvious because they want it to be a really easy user experience.
Right.
So I think, you know, maybe 0.5% of people, not even, would consider what TikTok's LUFS standard is when they upload a video to TikTok.
Right.
TikTok wants to make that as easy as humanly possible. So
Sure.
you can go digging through there. Also, a lot of video editors, I know Resolve has this option. I think Premiere has it as well. But you can actually export as a preset, and they have the presets for TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube. So you just click on that button, name your file, and then it's going to export it with the proper loudness for each platform.
Okay. Oh, that's good. So, it looks like we have a chat question that's come in from Jacqueline. So the question is, when should I use background music in a scene? Is it okay to have background music in a scene with dialogue? So, Calvin, do you want to take that first? And I know you used a lot of music to really good effect in Apathy Apocalypse.
Yeah, sure. In my opinion, I don't think you should ever include a track just for the sake of including a track. Oftentimes, music can help set the mood of a scene, so that's one big use of it. And of course, you have to keep in mind the balance between the dialogue and the music to make sure it's not being overpowered. In Apathy Apocalypse, personally, there is a backing track that's played throughout the entire documentary because usually it was very fast-paced music because I wanted to keep it moving, to keep the energy flowing. But I feel like if you're doing something that's maybe more long form and perhaps more narrative, or just doesn't need that constant push to capture the viewer's interest, it's probably better to have some moments of silence, just to let the viewer, just to make sure the music doesn't become a constant drone. That's my opinion. Yeah.
Right, that makes good sense. So intentionality is a really important factor for you. So not just music for music's sake, but there's something that lends itself to the story. And then you mentioned that it's important to have those quiet moments and that dynamic sort of quality. And Randy, when you're balancing music with dialogue, what kind of considerations would you have top of mind?
Yeah, kind of along with what Calvin was saying, it's just making sure that the dialogue is king at all points. So making sure that you're never losing that dialogue. Another thing that's kind of cool on that same topic, and Calvin kind of touched on this with silence, is that if you do have a drone or some music or something like that that's happening for a long period of time, one of the coolest tools that you have is the mute button. So you can just mute the music, and all of a sudden there's this total loss of, it feels like the whole ground has been stripped out from under you. So you can really use that as a tool, which can be pretty cool to use. But yeah, just in terms of making sure that it's not ever overpowering your dialogue, that's probably the biggest thing. Making sure that intelligibility-wise, you can always hear what the actor is saying. You can hear even quiet things like in the way they emote, like little nuances in their breath and in their speech. There can be some really important acting details that live there, and you don't want to mask those with music.
Okay, that makes good sense. Back to Calvin, I was wondering, was there a particular inspiration that you had for your short film's sound design? Was there a documentary perhaps that you'd watched, or a collection of documentaries that you'd watched that maybe you drew upon? Where did the inspiration come for your overall sound design?
Not only for the sound design, but also for just the animation and the editing in general. It was really inspired by a series of animated documentaries made by TED, the people who run the TED Talks.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure you've seen some of their animations on their TEDx, I think that's what it's called, TED YouTube channel.
Oh.
And they really use, and their entire goal is to make these complicated topics and condense them down and make them accessible to a lot of people. And to do that, they have this really colorful, fast-paced style of editing and visuals and sound. And that's part of where I got my inspiration for having that lighthearted music running throughout, because whenever I watched one of their documentaries, it really pulled me in. It kept me engaged to watch through all that really technical explanation stuff they did. So yeah, TED Ed, great sound design in my opinion. Had a lot of inspiration from them.
Oh, that's great. So TED Ed, and did you say do they have like a YouTube channel, or is that available, like freely available? Oh, that's great.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a pretty big YouTube channel. You can find them online.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll have to check that out. We got another question that's come in. It said most audio recording options rely on knowing where to place or aim the mic in advance, and also depend on the actor staying within a certain range of the microphone. How would you handle scenes where the actors go off script or are improvising? How do you handle miking in those particular instances? Randy, probably good one for you to start with.
Sure, yeah. No, that's a great question. I have some friends who do work in reality TV, and they say it's the absolute Wild West. They basically try to get lavalier microphones on everybody, so little lapel microphones like these, and they'll basically snake them up their shirt and hide them sort of under their collar. And then it's basically all day of making sure that they have batteries, making sure that they have good transmission to the recording unit. That's it's a full-time job, and on a lot of reality TV sets, they don't know when the action's going to happen. The action just kind of happens randomly, and they have to be ready to go and ready to capture it. So a lot of the time, boom miking doesn't work too well because you don't want to see the boom in the shot.
Yeah. Yet
they've got to frame the shot almost instantly. They literally turn on the camera, whip it up, and they're recording sometimes because a fight's broke out or what have you. So lavalier microphones are really popular in that sort of a set where the actors might be riffing or they might be going off script. That tends to be pretty popular for that. Also, just if it is a film set and it's a little bit more organized, you're gonna have a boom op there. If the actors are taking some liberties and just adding stuff in, usually the boom op will get a pretty good sense of that flow of the communication, and they'll just kind of tip the boom back and forth between actors. It's a lot easier when they follow a script exactly, but if they don't, it's not impossible either.
Okay, so it sounds like like you mentioned in the pre-recorded video, it's very common to have the lav mics plus the boom, and probably a planted mic or two to make sure you've covered off all the bases. And then it sounds like I could only imagine what that would look like in post, trying to sync everything up and
absolutely.
All that
you think of a show like Survivor, for instance, they're gonna have, you see them, they have like the necklaces on people. It's usually like some sort of a bamboo necklace or something that looks like it's part of the island. That's where they would hide the microphone, and then each person will have a lav on. Each person might have a backup, and then there will be 12 to 15 boom ops running around, and you never see them because they're really intentional with where they hide. But there's 40 people in those crews. An absolutely crazy amount of people.
Yeah, that sounds crazy. It's fun. I was curious, Calvin, are you planning any other documentaries? Have you got anything in the hopper, anything you're working on that you can share with us, like that's not like super secret?
With a very similar style to the Apocalypse, I'm working on a completely unrelated documentary about this ancient weapon used by the Byzantine Empire.
Oh.
Just branching out. but it's gone a lot smoother this time. I'm not using Krita for animation. And I feel like overall the process of editing the video and and creating the film. It's just been so much smoother now that I've had that experience under my belt.
Oh, that's great. And based on the conversations that you've had with Randy in doing this seminar, is there any sort of takeaways that you're going to be incorporating into the new documentary? Is that
Absolutely. There's a lot of scenes where, like when the historical figures are fighting or whatever, where they're either really far away from each other, really close together. And I think that keeping in mind what Randy said about how we can create that illusion of being close or far, I think that'll be a really cool effect to play with.
Oh, okay, great. That's great. I'm just looking at the time here, so we're coming up on just a couple of minutes left, and there's just a couple of more questions that I'd love to pose to you both. So for Randy, the question would be, is there anything a director can do on set to make the sound person's job easier or more manageable, or set you up for success?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I think on smaller shoots where the director is really involved with the sound guy, it's nice to know things like, where are we going to be shooting? How long are we going to be shooting for? What costumes, or is there anything? Basically describe the shot to me exactly how you see it going, and then I can kind of prepare based on what microphone I'm going to use or what type of setup I need. As you start to get into bigger budget stuff, typically that question of how does the director make it easier for the sound guy really flips, and it becomes, how does the sound guy make it easier for the director? The sound guy should ultimately be getting out of the director's way as much as possible. Usually on a larger set, you'll be talking with the assistant director and then really letting the director just work with the talent. That's really their whole focus. Maybe talent and the camera guy, but generally speaking, you want to be as invisible as possible. So things that help a sound person a lot are just knowing what's coming up the next day, how many batteries do they need, are you going to be outdoors? Basically those three things we talked about earlier: reverb, bad levels, and wind, how to remedy each of those issues on each day, and then preparing so much other stuff. So I bring everything with me so that if the director says anything like, oh, this person's actually going to be flying in on a dragon, there's going to be fire going off everywhere, I'm like, great, I have exactly what I need for that setup. So
I've got my dragon mic set up just here handy, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it really shifts to how can you serve the director the best, and that's ultimately going to get you more jobs. So works out.
Well, that's great advice. Awesome. And Calvin, what's the future hold for you? Like, what do you see yourself doing? Are you planning on getting into documentary filmmaking, that sort of thing? What's the future hold?
As infuriating as some of the animation and editing end up being, I really enjoyed the process of researching and writing and producing the documentary. I'm thinking about going to study journalism at U of T.
Oh,
so
fantastic.
I can work on these kinds of documentaries or more informational type videography full time.
Well, that's great. I think I'm certainly looking forward to seeing what you come up with in the future, Calvin. It's you've got like a real talent there. So yeah, I can't wait to see. But just looking at the time, it looks like it's gone by so quick. But I really want to thank both of you, not just for doing the live interactive Q&A today, but for all the work that you put into doing the pre-recorded seminar, and just all the support you've lent to the OYFF, and we really appreciate it here. And I think this is going to be a fantastic resource for student filmmakers going forward. As I said, it's going to live on in perpetuity on the educators portal, and just really wanted to say thank you to both of you for spending time with us today.
Awesome. It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
No worries. Thanks. So for all of you watching out there, I want you to be sure to follow us on social media to stay up to date with all of our latest news, seminar announcements, and other filmmaking events. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.